That brings us to item 12, approval of the minutes of the December 11th, 2023 board meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the December 11th, 2023 board meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Snipes, any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 7-0. And that brings us to public participation. I would like to make a statement before Ms. Taylor introduces our public participation guests. The board welcomes and encourages public participation. We respectfully ask that you adhere to the procedures provided in Board Policy BEDH, public participation at meetings. Your comments should be limited to 3 minutes and must remain on either the topic noted on your sign-in form or a listed agenda item. Questions asked during public participation will be handled in accordance with Board Policy BEDH. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Dawn Weathersby is here to speak about Board Policy KEC.
Good evening. I had intended to walk in here tonight and be intentionally provocative. I was going to read a passage from Ezekiel, you know, the one about the promiscuous woman, her breasts, her silver and gold toys, and her desire for donkeys. Well, you know. My purpose with this would have been to prove to you that out-of-context passages can make even the Bible sound prurient. I decided against reading this excerpt, however, because I didn't want you to fixate on my inappropriate use of out-of-context passages from the Bible the way I have fixated on your inappropriate use of out-of-context passages from A Court of Mist and Fury. I am very concerned about passages being taken out of context by people who haven't bothered to read the book. I think we can all probably agree that I could spend at least 15 minutes up here reading lewd verses from the Bible, verses about anything from incest to genital mutilation. Yet because you're likely familiar with the entirety of that text, you'd recognize that these passages do not represent the book as a whole. Most of you did not bother to read A Court of Mist and Fury. Yet, as a board, you wholesale rejected the advice of the committee who did read the book in its entirety and reported that the sexually explicit passages do not represent the book as a whole. Instead, you listened to 15 minutes of out-of-context passages and then purposefully decided to become book banners. Yes, banners. We're not going to quibble over the multiple synonyms people who ban books use to mitigate book banning. And for context, the audiobook for A Court of Mist and Fury is 23 hours long, so you really didn't get a perspective of the book as a whole after only 15 minutes. And I want to be very clear on a point here. My commentary isn't truly about A Court of Mist and Fury. I'm not going to die on the hill of a high fantasy book, no matter how much I personally enjoyed the book and the resilience shown by the protagonist in overcoming her childhood trauma, PTSD, and domestic violence. No, rather, I'm going to die on the hill of your indiscriminate banning of a series of books that most of you haven't bothered to read, and that none of you bothered to discuss in their entirety. You have set a treacherous precedent in denying the challenged book committee's recommendation. This board has unparalleled power without any of the responsibility of that power in Board Policy KEC. I naively believed you wouldn't misuse this power. I was predictably disappointed. And now, according to Board Policy KEC, this particular set of books can't even be revisited again for 5 years, regardless of your hasty dismissal. If you decide that you indeed deserve the privilege of being judge, jury, and executioner in spite of the hard work of the challenged book committee, then at the very least consider revising Board Policy KEC so that the board is also required to follow the instructions given to the challenged book committee in Board Policy AR-KECR, which reads, the committee must not pull passages or parts out of context. The committee must weigh values and faults against each other and base its opinions on the material as a whole. Your students, your teachers, and your constituency deserve a board that is thoughtful and thorough in its decision-making. Thank you.
Tess Pratt is here to speak about book banning.
If you were to walk into my classroom, you'd likely get an idea of who I am based on some of the items in it. They serve to remind me of who I am. Never have these items mattered more than in recent years. Who I am, frankly, feels under attack. Upon entering my classroom, you'll see a plaque of the Boston Tea Party participants. Many took the secret of their participation in this event to their deaths, but my fifth great-grandfather did not. Thomas Fracker is listed. I am a descendant of a man who participated in this country's original protest. Perhaps this is why his granddaughter is so dedicated to the rights of all Americans to protest. On my desk, you'll see a copy of a book written by Thomas's son, George, the sole survivor of a shipwreck off the coast of Argentina. He did two things when he returned: wrote a book and became a teacher. Perhaps my destiny as a teacher was sealed by George's decision. On the wall behind my desk is a photo of my second great-grandmother, Ellen Robinson Fracker, who homesteaded to South Dakota and built a one-room schoolhouse. How brave she must have been to traverse across the country to an unknown land inspired by a dream to teach. Perhaps I carried Ellen with me when I came to teach in South Carolina. Draped over my chair is a wounded warrior blanket, a reminder of all the sacrifices our soldiers have made for the freedoms we enjoy. In my family, we have served all the way to this country's beginnings. Hanging on my wall is my favorite soldier, Captain Stanley S. Fracker III. He is in a helicopter in the jungles of Vietnam. My father would return from his service on the battlefield and ultimately serve in the classroom. I've always been struck by the fact that he was dedicated to serving our democracy on both these fronts. Perhaps I carry my father with me as I fight to protect our precious democracy in the classroom. I share this with you because I refuse to own the narrative that a loud minority seems hell-bent on perpetuating. I am not an indoctrinator because I believe that we should teach diverse literature. And as the last meeting's appellant seemed to suggest, I am most certainly not complicit in the sex trafficking of young girls because I support the decision of a 9-person team to keep a challenge book on the shelves of a high school library. For the record, I fought to protect sex-trafficked children long before this issue became what it is today. Over 20 years ago, I consulted with experts, I was a guest speaker in churches, I walked door to door soliciting signatures on petitions. In my vast experience, I came across zero evidence connecting books with sexual content to sex trafficking. Finally, neither I nor members of my department should be the target of board emails to my superintendent. I was recently privy to 2 board emails. One called for supply lists from and for anyone in the Chapin High School English department since August of 2020. The other suggested that racism should only be taught in history classes, as English teachers are not trained for this. I am a certified history and English teacher, and I'm stunned and incredibly disheartened at how little you know about what we do. In closing, I would like to share a final classroom item with you. It is one of the many plaques that I have received from my sweet students throughout the years. It reads, "One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world." This is who I am. This is who we are.
Sarah Kimberlin is here to speak about book banning.
Good evening. I'm reading an excerpt from Ray Bradbury's novel, Fahrenheit 451. Bradbury was a famous and widely celebrated 20th century American novelist, essayist, and poet. I read this because I fear we are on a very slippery slope with removing books from our students' hands. What more easily explained and natural? With school turning out more runners, jumpers, racers, tinkerers, grabbers, snatchers, flyers, and swimmers instead of examiners, critics, knowers, and imaginative creators, the word intellectual, of course, became the swear word it deserved to be. You always dread the unfamiliar. Surely you remember the boy in your own school class who was exceptionally bright, did most of the reciting and answering while the others sat like so many leaden idols hating him. And wasn't it this bright boy you selected for beatings and tortures after hours? Of course it was. We must all be alike. Not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal. Each man the image of each other, then all are happy. For there are no mountains to make them cower to judge themselves against. So, a book becomes a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind. Who knows who might be the target of the well-read man? Me? I won't stomach them for a minute. Do you know why books such as this are so important? Because they have quality. And what does the word quality mean? To me, it means texture. This book has pores. It has features. This book can go under the microscope. You'd find life under the glass, streaming past in infinite profusion. The more pores, the more truthfully recorded details of life per square inch you can get on a sheet of paper, the more literary you are. That's my definition anyway. Telling detail, fresh detail. The good writers touch life often. So now do you see why books are hated and feared? They show the pores in the face of life. The comfortable people want only wax moon faces, poreless, hairless, and expressionless. We are living in a time when flowers are trying to live on flowers instead of growing on good rain and black loam.
Lee Bryant is here to speak about the importance of books.
Ongoing vitriolic book debates tend to cast ELA teachers as villains, but it's easy to villainize strangers, so I'd like to introduce myself. I am Jackson Lee Bryant, just Lee, to friends and family. When I was little, my family lived in Colorado Springs in a house subjected to my father's alcoholism and abusive rage. His rage infected his 3 children. My older sister and brother fought brutal battles while I shouted, mostly at my brother. I always took my sister's side because she always took mine, even against our parents. They eventually divorced, remarried new people, and our mom and stepfather relocated us to South Carolina, where, when we lived in a double-wide trailer outside St. Matthews, my sister, then 17 and in her first semester of college, died. Heading home from a date, she crashed her powder blue Volkswagen Beetle into the side of a moving freight train. The tragic thing about trauma is how it isolates. My siblings and I internalized the violence of our upbringing differently, silently, becoming not allies, but combatants. My whole family grieved my sister's death, rearranging our lives around the shape of her absence. But walled within ourselves, we mourned alone. Multiple times, I contemplated escape. I can say, without a shred of exaggeration, books saved my life. In novels by Dean Koontz and Stephen King, I encountered believable characters confronting unbelievable situations. Most of them survived. In literary works such as Their Eyes Are Watching God, I encountered survivors who were internally destroyed. From them, I learned that true survival requires ongoing, difficult inside work, and their stories inspired me to start that work myself. In poetry, I encountered people who'd had similar experiences, and their crafted language taught me that trauma need not stay ugly, that it can be transmuted into art, simultaneously painful and beautiful. So the next time you consider removing a book, I want you to envision the child who may need that specific book. Maybe he can't afford glasses, and he leans close to the bookcase as he squints at the title. Maybe she values playing lacrosse more than reading, but something about the cover art speaks to her imagination. Maybe she's a recent transplant with multicolored hair, and the author's book jacket photo resembles the best friend she left behind. None of us knows exactly who the child is. None of us knows what the child endured just to be here. None of us knows why this particular book has the power to reconnect the child to this life we all share. But I know this: if we remove that connection, we endanger the child. Remember that.
Grace Abbott is here to speak about Banned Book Committee.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Superintendent Ross, district personnel, and Lexington Richland 5 residents. My name is Grace Abbott, and I am your district teacher of the year. At the beginning of the school year, my message to all district faculty and staff focused on teamwork and lifting up every individual because everyone matters. I spoke about how each person has something of value to contribute and how our students are better because each person is contributing their energy and time and talent. The board's decision to overrule the book committee's finding about Sarah J. Maas's book and then to proceed by banning the whole series directly contradicts that message, and it has invalidated the process which has otherwise served the district so well. Instead of trusting the individuals who read and analyzed the book and had knowledge of the students that the book would reach, the board's decision undermines the committee's authority and professionalism. In the board's ruling, the message sent was that the committee met, read, and discussed without purpose. Their energy, their time, and their talent were wasted, and their findings were useless. This does not reflect well on our district, and it does not reflect well on our values. As a representative of the teaching community, as a professional educator, and as a future parent of a D5 student, I want to publicly thank the committee members who gave of their energy and time and talent, who are experts in their field, and who deserve better from our leadership. If we are going to ask individuals to give of their resources for the betterment of our students, then the least we can do is to listen to them and to show them the professional courtesy that they deserve. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your attention.
Mary Wood is here to speak about books.
Good evening. I don't think I need to introduce myself, and I'm going to be reading from Between the World and Me. The streets were not my only problem. If the streets shackled my right leg, the schools shackled my left. Failed to comprehend the streets, and you gave up your body now, but failed to comprehend the books or the schools, and you gave up your body later. I suffered at the hands of both, but I resent the schools more. There was nothing sanctified about the laws of the streets. The laws were amoral and practical. You rolled with the posse to the party as sure as you wore boots in the snow or raised an umbrella in the rain. These were rules aimed at something obvious, the great danger that haunted every visit to Shake and Bake, every bus ride downtown. But the laws of schools were aimed at something distant and vague. What did it mean to, as our elders told us, grow up and be somebody? And what precisely did this have to do with an education rendered as rote discipline? To be educated in my Baltimore mostly meant always packing an extra number 2 pencil and working quietly. Educated children walked in a single file line on the right side of the hallway, raised their hands to use the lavatory, and carried the lavatory pass when en route. Educated children never offered excuses, certainly not childhood itself. The world had no time for the childhoods of black boys and girls. How could the schools, algebra, biology, and English were not subjects so much as opportunities to better discipline the body, to practice writing between the lines, copying the directions legibly, memorizing theorems extracted from the world they were created to represent. All of it felt so distant to me. I remember sitting in my 7th grade French class and not having any idea why I was there. I did not know any French people, and nothing around me suggested I ever would. France was a rock rotating in another galaxy, around another sun, in another sky that I would never cross. Why precisely was I sitting in this classroom? The question was never answered. I was a curious boy, but the schools were not concerned with curiosity. They were concerned with compliance. I loved a few of my teachers, but I cannot say I truly believed any of them. I sensed that the schools were hiding something, drugging us with false morality so we would not see, so we did not ask. Why, for us, and only us, is the other side of free will and free spirits an assault upon our bodies? This is not a hyperbolic concern. When our elders presented school to us, they did not present it as a place of high learning, but as a means of escape from death and penal warehousing. Fully 60% of all young black men who drop out of high school will go to jail. This should disgrace the country, but it does not. And while I couldn't crunch the numbers or plumb the history back then, I sense that the fear that marked West Baltimore could not be explained by the schools.
Ms. Woods, your time has run. Thank you.
Catherine Romp is here to speak about instructional materials.
Hey, I'm Dr. Catherine Ramp. I'm a D5 graduate. My children attend school at Piney Woods Elementary School and Riverland Hills Baptist. I'm an ELA teacher at Dutch Fork High School, and I'm a professional. I have the ability to choose books that are high interest, that can also help teach the standards and grow my students. This can be a bit of a difficult balance, though, trying to find books that are rigorous, that are acceptable for everybody, and are high interest at the same time. But I have to say that I am thankful that we have this opportunity here locally to talk about books, right? Because who knows Lexbridge 5 students better than the people who live and teach in Lexbridge 5, right? We're not the same as students in Charleston. They aren't the same students in Greenville. And I'm thankful that we have the local power to decide what's best for our students, which is why I'm concerned about what's happening at the state level with instructional materials. If you guys haven't checked out Regulation 43-170, it's the Uniform Procedure for Selection and Reconsideration of Instructional Materials. It's a much bigger version of the discussion that's happening right now, right here, about books and banning books and instructional materials. The second reading of this regulation is happening on February 13th, public hearing, and the final day for public commentary is January 21st. So if you have feelings about instructional materials and making sure that if something big happens tomorrow, I can show my students an article about it and teach it and have that teachable moment, then I suggest you reach out to Lisa Widener, that's Ellen Widener at ed.se.gov, to share your thoughts about keeping that control local within our district where we know students and we can have these discussions. I'm worried that decisions both here locally and statewide are being made not in students' best interests, and that these recent discussions touching on literature are actually a pretense for getting rid of diverse viewpoints. In my dissertation on the first page, I quote Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. I don't know if you read anything by her, but she says that literature is a powerful tool for building empathy, understanding, and compassion in our students. They need mirrors in which they can see themselves and windows through which they can see the world. And I don't know about you, but I want my child to be able to see himself in literature, but also peer into other ways of thinking and doing so that he can be more urbane and sophisticated, the kind of global citizen that we want our Lexbridge 5 students to eventually be. Anyway, thanks.
Scott Herring is here to speak about book review in District 5.
Good evening. Also here to speak about the same topic, but maybe a slightly different perspective. To briefly recount, at the December meeting, the book A Court of Mist and Fury went through the established book review process and was found acceptable by an 8-to-1 margin. A parent appealed, and the decision was given an opportunity to speak here at the meeting. Following those remarks, a motion was made to remove both Mist and Fury and the remaining series. Had that motion only included the book in question, and the board decided to remove it, I may not be here tonight. I may not have liked the outcome of that decision, but I have to respect the process. It went through the process. Nearing the end of that discussion, Dr. Ross and 2 other board members tried to iterate that the board was debating removing a number of books that had not yet been reviewed. Dr. Ross said, and I quote, "There is no vehicle for administration through policy to consider a book that has not come through your KEC policy." Clarification was then being sought by 2 other board members. The search for that clarification was then quickly dismissed and a rush to take a vote. As a result of the vote, 4 books that had not been reviewed were removed from the district schools. My issue with the board's action is not that Mist and Fury was removed through due process. My concern is that the board completely ignored the due process for the remaining books in the series. Why would a motion to remove books without those materials going through the process even be entertained? As a result, it's now been established that materials don't necessarily have to go through that process to be removed. During the next appeal, can a board member now make a motion to remove other unreviewed books that have, during that motion? If a theatrical work is reviewed and deemed appropriate, but then appealed, can a board member move that that play and all other plays or any other plays by the same author be removed? If a musical composition goes through the same process, may a board member make a motion that that composition and compositions by the same composer be removed? Indeed, it's a slippery slope. As you're all aware, I ran for one of these board seats last election, and I can tell you unequivocally, I would be very uneasy wielding the power you have now given this board. You have a policy for reviewing materials, and it's your job to follow it. As Dr. Ross indicated, each book should go through the process, meaning the series should have had 5 separate committees. Several of you are parents in the district with the same rights and privileges as the rest of us. You could have simply submitted those for review yourself, but instead, you used your privilege as board members and took matters into your own hands. Are you really certain you want this board to have that power? And are you certain you want future boards to have that power? I know you all intend to act in the best interest of our children, and I hope you'll continue to do that. I just hope that you will use the very policies and procedures that you have set in place to do that work. Thank you.
That concludes public participation.
All right, that concludes public participation.